Yeah, we've done a lot of work on this. You'll see a paper coming out later this year, actually in a couple of months, and analyzing this from from a team of quantum physicists. It seems like SHA-256 is very secure.
Good.
To be able to mine Bitcoin in a 10-minute block, you'll need a quantum computer the size of pretty much the universe, uh, by the methodologies used today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coin Juice. Today, I'm joined by Chris Tam and Hunter Hsiao, contributors to Bitcoin Quantum Project at BTQ Technologies. Uh, to start us off, could you explain what both your roles are at BTQ actually and your day to day, and how it connects to the work you're doing around quantum computing and blockchain?
Yeah, happy to start. Thanks, Andrew, for having us. My name is Chris, one of the contributors to Bitcoin Quantum. And at BTQ, we've been long interested in addressing the threat and the risk that quantum computers pose to many technologies, namely, really all of encryption. And when we talk about encryption, we're really talking about anything that gets digitally secured over the internet. And there's a very large attack vector that quantum computers pose. This is becoming this has become increasingly sort of popular and aware by more people. But there's this threat that a future quantum computer could plausibly break all of the encryption and all of the security that we're using today. And so at BTQ, we've been building products and solutions to help migrate the world over to a post-quantum world. And one of the largest attack vectors that we see unaddressed, so one of the largest, call it fills to gap, or gaps to fill, is the quantum risk to Bitcoin. The reason this is such a big issue is because unlike a lot of traditional corporations or organizations, there's not a centralized structure to Bitcoin. And that's what has made it be a very popular decentralized cryptocurrency. Um, and due to that, there's this explicit sort of gap in top-down centralized approach to upgrading Bitcoin to be post-quantum. And that's I think that's fair, and I think that's actually a large value proposition of Bitcoin. But what we've been doing at BTQ has been, and with Hunter and the rest of our team, it's been working on solutions to coordinate an approach to upgrade Bitcoin. And I'll toss it over to Hunter.
Yeah, great introduction. Yeah, I'm Hunter. Nice to meet everyone. Focusing on product management and strategy and operations for blockchain projects. BTQ, yeah, we're really interested in quantum security, especially for blockchains and other mission critical networks. We think it's really interesting to start with blockchain projects because it's really only secured by the cryptography that backs up the infrastructure. And something else that we're interested in is, for example, privacy, right? As blockchains get more mainstream, we need more security, and we also need more privacy. These are all kind of like big use cases that the team is focused on at the moment. The one that we're talking about today, Bitcoin Quantum, just think it's a really innovative project to not wait for any quantum attacks to happen to Bitcoin, to wait for Bitcoin to come together on their social consensus to implement a change, and instead just launching something as a test bed and experiment for these quantum secure digital signatures, and to start stress testing on what those actual implications are when you implement the fixes.
Interesting. So over the past year, there's been more attention on quantum computing and its potential impact on Bitcoin. From both your perspectives, what has actually changed in the last year, basically? And why are people starting to take this more seriously in 2026?
Yeah, happy to start this one. I mean, 2025 was a really momentous year for the industry of quantum computing. I mean, really, I trace a lot of this back to December of 2024, when Google in that December released their Willow chip paper, which basically outlined a path to achieve fault-tolerant quantum computing at scale. Basically, before then, it was a very sort of theoretical notion that you could build a large enough quantum computer to do useful things. But after the paper, and in the paper, they demonstrated exactly sort of the fundamental building blocks that researchers and engineers could use in order to actually scale quantum computers to have enough resources to do interesting things. One of those things being, breaking encryption plausibly. And so through 2024 and well, I guess after 2024 and through 2025, there was really a large sort of inflection point where you saw a massive amount of funding going into quantum computing companies, where you saw over $3 billion in the public sector, and much more in the private sector, going into the development of basically these quantum technologies. And sort of in lockstep has been a lot of federal mandates. So namely the United States and the NIST have been launching their post-quantum standards process, but we really saw them start to take it seriously, or continue sort of emphasize through 2025 that a lot of US businesses and organizations and even government agencies. So we saw the Department of War in late 2025 come out with an internal memo about standardizing and needing and requiring all of their internal agencies to upgrade to post-quantum. So yeah, we saw a lot of, I think 2025 was the year that quantum became mainstream, or at least, it developed all of these sort of undercurrents to become mainstream, as it maybe is now becoming in 2026 to the more general population, which is great because it deserves a lot of attention. And especially coordinating a migration on this scale, it requires everyone to sort of be involved.
So after 1 year, let's say, of it going a little bit mainstream, at the end of this year, from December 2024, would you say that the main risk here with quantum is the reverse engineering of public to private key, or is there also signature issues here?
Yeah, well, those are
Or
actually
more?
very close. Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, there's I mean, when it comes to security and cryptography, I mean, what you mentioned, reversing a public key into a private key, and sort of that second issue of signatures, it's a very real risk, and those are actually very closely related, especially in a blockchain context. As you may well know, when you hold, let's say, Bitcoin or Ethereum, when you hold any cryptocurrency, that's stored in the private key. So you give away your private key, then you'll be, giving away access to whatever Bitcoin you hold. And anytime you want to transact using your Bitcoin, you'll be signing messages onto a blockchain, which then everyone is able to verify that transaction came from you, and they verify that using your public key. So the private key and the public key and the signature, those are all actually very closely involved. And basically, as soon as you make a transaction, as soon as you sign a transaction, you expose your public key on the blockchain. And quantum adversaries, even today, are harvesting those public keys and attempting to decrypt those in the future.
Okay, so are those the main though issues at the moment, or can quantum expand? Like,
Yeah, I mean, those are a very real risk today. Quantum computing has a variety of other applications that could be very, very interesting. If you think about if you think about the types of computations that quantum computers are really good for, they're really well suited for basically for the scale of computation that they're grounded in. And when we talk about quantum computers, we're talking about operating over information at atomic or subatomic scale. So basically at the scale of an atom or smaller. And while all of the sort of high performance computing technologies that we have today have been able to get us very far in these sort of classical types of computation where we're operating over basically over binary bits. These quantum computers are able to operate over real physical properties in the real world. So, they're able to operate over atoms and leverage properties of quantum mechanics to compute things. And so, therefore, the types of applications that they'll be really useful for are things that are quantum in nature. And if you think about yourself, myself, the computers that we're using right now, we're all made of atoms. In fact, our entire universe is made of atoms. And so, if you have a computer that's sort of native to that scale, to that modality that is computing over, we get some really interesting things where we're able to then compute over how our brains work. We get to compute over molecules, and drug discovery becomes exponentially more efficient and possible. And the guys here that we talk about the sort of the ether between all of us all the time, and there's this like real. I mean, we sense that there's some sort of underlying fabric in our universe. By using quantum computing, we may actually be able to tap into that.
Very interesting. So not all Bitcoin addresses carry the same level of risk exposure at the moment. As far as my research has led me, can you map out the different cases between these script keys? So, like you have the P2PK, Taproot, and reused public addresses are the main risk. But can you elaborate on that and maybe explain what makes each one more or less vulnerable, and what can the what can the typical Bitcoin holder do to, let's say, secure the wallet?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab unless anybody else wants to. I've been speaking a lot, so.
Go ahead.
Okay, so different types of. Okay, so when we look at the risks to Bitcoin, as you mentioned, there's several sort of layers of risk. If we take, if we take it from the ground up, when Satoshi originally started Bitcoin, he was paying. Basically, you construct a transaction by exposing your public key right off the bat. And so the first, call it, few million Bitcoin worth of transactions were following this payment notation, where you were basically paying, paying from from an address that you exposed your public key to. Subsequently, Satoshi realized that there was actually a quantum threat to the way that these signatures were being constructed, using elliptic curve cryptography. And he then modified the way that you can send transactions over the network. And he did so by sending to a hash of an address of a public key. And this added, some layer of protection, where, at that point, every time someone sent a Bitcoin, they weren't completely exposing their public key. But unfortunately, the underlying addresses that they were still using still depended on the security of all that cryptography. And so, there's like the attack vector of, when you send your crypto, which is, the best practice is that you're supposed to move it to a new account, all the remaining unspent, UTXOs that you would try to spend, would get moved to a new account that would not have a public key exposed. And Satoshi's upgrade at that point would have helped secure that, because after you sign your transactions, you move all of your unspent tokens to a new account, and you're not signing anything from that account until you do, and then you move it again. So that's secure. But most people don't follow that. And in fact, on most blockchains, even core Bitcoin um, core Bitcoin holders, they sort of reuse addresses. And so anytime you reuse an address in Bitcoin, that becomes a threat. If we're to break it down numerically, there's about 6.2 odd Bitcoin that are in basically unmoved addresses that we're assuming to be Satoshis. So, they're plausibly secure, but we also aren't really sure if they'll ever be moved to, let's say, a post-quantum migration that Bitcoin Core undergoes. And then there's uh, several millions more that are at risk because of the way that people sign transactions and expose their public keys.
Yeah, I believe it's something like 33% of the total circulating supply is those first two vulnerable addresses that Chris mentioned. So the first one is like the pay to public key, and then the other one is like any pay to public key hash addresses that have been reused, and they add up to around 33% of the circulating supply right now.
Is a lot.
Just quite large considering it's almost a trillion.
Yeah. And what's the link here to Taproot? Is Taproot, because
Uh,
Taproot is not very safe, no, yeah. Even though it was,
yeah,
I mean, just
that's right. Yes. Yes, so Taproot was really popular because it enabled basically scaling solutions on Bitcoin. You were able to, it's the technology underpinning the Lightning Network, which is like a efficient payments network on Bitcoin. Um, and in Taproot, you basically you still rely on this elliptic curve cryptography, and every time you create a Taproot transaction, you're leaving your key on there for some network to verify. And so Taproot signatures are inherently not post-quantum. They're not quantum secure. And the idea for BIP 360 was, okay, well, why don't we try to add like a post-quantum feature to Taproot, where instead of revealing your key as sort of a bit Satoshi was doing in his early days, and later realize that you want to quantum proof it, and Satoshi did that by paying to a hash of your public key. Tap or BIP 360 improves on Taproot by paying to a Merkle root, basically a hash of your Taproot signature.
okay. So
Yeah, I wanted to jump in. I'm just amazed, Chris and Hunter, at your command of all of the jargon. So I wanted to just share something that I'm coming from the content side. So we have something called qdanon.com, and we have like full guides on all of this stuff. Uh, and if I could share my screen, maybe that would be good.
go for it.
Um,
Beautiful.
yeah, because uh, can you see do you see this? Why Taproot is quantum vulnerable?
Yep.
Okay, so there's this, it go there's a lot of
Information.
information all over the place. And I think a large majority of the audience might just get, I don't know, they just might be swimming in all these words. So we have guides on everything, including Taproot. I think Taproot is even Taproot is a little bit of a involved topic. So we start
Hmm.
from post-quantum cryptography, and then Bitcoin and quantum computing, and then quantum computing, and then we just developed an part series on building a quantum secure Bitcoin, which goes into sort of like the engineering challenges of, larger signature sizes and how that impacts like the block space and the disk size, the disk space that's required. And I'm not a quantum expert. I just try to make sure that I try to take it from the perspective of someone new to quantum safe Bitcoin and what what would they be curious about? Maybe, but maybe they know a little bit of software engineering, or they have some engineering curiosity of what it would feel like to deploy a system like this. So the way I think about it is like we're sort of testing things out. We're like the frontline soldiers before Bitcoin maybe does their thing, right? So we're sort of and so it goes into detail on all of the engineering challenges that our engineering team has been going through. And the latest article is about HD wallet, hierarchical addresses, BIP32 seed phrases, and there was some post on Twitter about how would we support HD wallet derivation in a quantum secure Bitcoin. And so yes, that's sort
Really
of
interesting.
yeah, qdanon.com. Yes.
Really interesting. I'll have a look at this. Okay,
Yes, thank you.
so with this context in mind, let's say for an introduction, BIP 360 and BTQ Technologies are proposing a specific way forward. As I understand it, there are three main parts to BIP 360: a new address type that commits to quantum resistant keys, new signature algorithms, and a new transaction field for handling these signatures. Is that a fair description of the overall design of BIP 360?
Sorry, Andrew, can you repeat the three components?
Yeah. So three new signature. So basically here that I've written that the three main parts are in BIP 360. Was that correct? As in it's proposing three safeguards basically, and maybe for a little bit of info from that end.
Yeah, so the main thing with BIP 360 is introducing the pay to Merkle route, right? So like we discussed previously, the pay to tap route is vulnerable because it exposes the key path. So there's still a link to the digital signature that's being used, and it's not a quantum secure signature that's being used. So the innovation with P to MR, pay to tap Merkle root, is that there's only a script path that whenever you send a transaction, you only do so by revealing one of the scripts from the Merkle tree, and through that, there is no association to your public key that's ever going to be exposed on the blockchain. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
So in my research for BIP 360, basically what I found was that Hunter spoke about three things. He spoke about the Merkle tree, what you mentioned. I can't remember the terminology.
The key path?
Yeah, but there were also two others that he brought up. One of them, I think, here I have like the Sphinx, the Lithium, possibly Falcon, as three signature schemes that can be introduced to make it more quantum resistant. Maybe like a bit of explanation on that would be interesting.
Yeah, Chris, I think you're muted. Maybe I can give it intro and then you can continue. I think there's a difference that we can make with like short term and long range, short range and long range attacks as well. But I don't think Bit 360 actually introduces any changes to the digital signatures. So maybe Chris, you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So maybe Andrew, maybe you were looking at, Hunter's original posts about BIP 360. It was recently, I mean, it was amended near the end of its design phase where, by the time that they had included it in as a proposal into the repo, it had changed and basically removed all of the, addition and contemplation of additional signatures. So, in the original BIP 360 post, Hunter outlined a way to plausibly use post-quantum digital signatures to replace the elliptic curve digital signatures being used in Taproot. But that was since amended, and instead it just became a pay to Merkle route of the, or basically pay to a Merkle hash of the existing transaction signature path. And all of the contemplation for post-quantum digital signatures was moved to a future piece of work.
Okay, and this will be tested on the testnet of BTQ.
So yeah, the core BIP 360 of paying to Merkle root is what is being tested and what has been implemented on Bitcoin Quantum.
Okay, so now BTQ, will align it maybe into BTQ. Basically, BTQ Technologies is a company that focuses on quantum development to protect, let's say, BTC. Where we are right now with this testnet launch, is it like a sandbox kind of atmosphere where it's not actually fixing the problem, or it's not actually solving the problem yet, but it's beginning the process? And if so, what can you say about that?
How do I take this?
Yeah, I would say it's beginning the process for sure. The analogy we like to use is to say it's a canary in the coal mine. I'm not sure if that's been overused in this industry or not, but I think it's rather fitting in this context. So basically, it's sending out a songbird, right, into the coal mine to sense any dangers that are coming up. And usually, what this bird does is the moment it notices something, it flies back and gives the miners a notice, a signal saying that it's dangerous up ahead. Be careful when you do go. So that's basically what Bitcoin Quantum is. It's a functional testbed experiment, but a running blockchain network that is inspired and directly built by Bitcoin's code, right? So anyone that has had experience with Bitcoin or is looking to start new, sorry about that, Bill, um, is looking to, yeah, they can play around with Bitcoin Quantum, right? Using legacy addresses from Bitcoin, using the new dilithium addresses that we've introduced. They can also start to see what pay to Merkle root script actually looks like when you're transferring, let's say, the funds from me to you, Andrew, or me to Chris. These are all things that are actively working on Bitcoin Quantum. And instead of just thinking and brainstorming about these theories and these fixes, and for the core developers to merge them into the Bitcoin core protocol, this is a live blockchain that you can interact with. And we'll see where the value goes, but I think above all, the whole team is just really excited to be able to introduce this kind of technology to the ecosystem.
So it's like a fork of what we currently have, so that miners and whoever can go and build knowing that if something breaks, it's obviously a sandbox. It's okay, kind of thing. Is that what BTQ is offering?
I would say on testnet, yeah, that's a great, like, on testnet, it's okay if things break. We would rather not have things breaking in mainnet,
Okay.
right? We want to, that's why we're having these different iterations. We're on the third iteration now, what we call V0.3. So there has been a lot of issues that have come up from our very first version to now. But yeah, we want to make it a live blockchain network. Maybe it's something that's always in front of Bitcoin, sensing out any dangers that's up ahead. Right now, it's quantum computing and its threat to current cryptography. But who knows what it is 5, 10 years from now, right? If we have a quantum relevant, a crypto relevant quantum computer, um, maybe one of these post PQC, like post quantum cryptography, these digital signatures might break, and you might need to find another one. You might need to replace it. You might need to experiment with multiple signatures and be able to go back and forth. You might need, like, for example, quantum proof of work, right? If proof of work is too easy for a quantum computer. All I'm trying to point out is there's these different, always going to be something that needs to show Bitcoin the way ahead, because right now it's just, even just getting the developers and stakeholders together is proving to be like quite a slow process.
I can imagine. I mean, there's a lot of social consensus that needs to happen now around BIP 360.
Yeah, that's right. And not just BIP 360, but all the other BIPs that have been merged, right? And each camp has their own kind of like cost and trade-offs that they're proposing. Some teams think this favors like a whole ecosystem that comes after it. So there's a lot of different camps and opinions. And yeah, Bitcoin is showing us it's the real challenge right now is actually governance and coming to consensus about what solution to implement.
How can you have a solution to implement on a threat like quantum where we don't actually know what it looks like? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it's a super intuitive question. I mean, how do you make yourself quantum resistant without having a quantum computer to, test that resistance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this comes back to our entire industry and really all of our technology is built on this. It's built on this, largely theoretical analysis and theoretical risks, where if you think of, security as basically a series of concentric rings, right? So you have like an inner ring, a subset of another one, subset of another ring. And the idea of being able to secure something using some algorithm that is plausibly secure against a quantum computer involves going down to the sort of theoretical level of analysis and determining whether you think or whether we think as a scientific community. And really, I'm not talking about like the four people on this call. I'm talking about standards bodies across the world that are driven by cartographers and researchers and governments, really. But they essentially evaluate different algorithms and see whether they lie within a complexity class or basically inside a class that is secure against quantum computers. And for the longest time, the security that we've deployed today, we've actually always known that it lies within the class of attackable problems by quantum computer, but up until recently, it wasn't really a large concern because we didn't think quantum computers would exist, and the signature schemes that we picked today, the cryptography we picked today, was efficient enough. But now that quantum is on the radar, you have government standards bodies and regulators saying, okay, well, there are certain types of algorithms that we have relatively strong scientific understanding that these should be resistant against quantum attacks, and they're rolling out these standards processes around those algorithms, and so there's no certainty in these algorithms, and that's why that's another reason why we think Bitcoin Quantum is an extremely important project, because we're assuming that cryptography is always going to be able to be broken. And so we follow this idea, this sort of mantra of being crypto agile. How quickly are you able to upgrade and change the cryptography that you're deploying in order to keep up with all of the latest technological advancements?
So it's testing the resistance basically, or coming up with different cryptographic ways to break it and see if they manage to break it themselves, like.
It's more so deploying the state of the art post quantum cryptographic algorithms in a blockchain and making sure that it works, because it's
Okay.
actually very hard to do.
Okay, so where does Shaw's algorithm come into here?
So Shor's algorithm is an efficient algorithm for finding the discrete logarithm, or basically, breaking the discrete logarithm problem. What we mean by efficient, it gives you exponential speed up in the number of qubits to find the discrete log. And so that's 2 to the n, where n is the number of qubits that you have. So if you have qubits, you're 4 times faster. If you have 3 qubits, you're 8 times faster. If you have 1,000 qubits, then you're 2 to the 1,000 times faster, and that's a lot faster, right? And so Shor's algorithm gives you exponential speed up to break the discrete logarithm problem, which is the problem. It's a mathematical problem that elliptic curve cryptography and pretty much all of the cryptography, public key cryptography we use today assumes to be difficult. So all of our public key, private key, the way that we derive public keys and private keys depend on the difficulty of breaking the discrete logarithm problem. If you have 1,000 qubits on a quantum computer running Shor's algorithm, you get 2 to the 1,000 speed up over breaking that algorithm. Your ECDSA no longer becomes secure, and that's really the risk that we've been talking about, where you have these signatures that are broadcasted on chain, verified by a public key, that a quantum adversary can harvest and decrypt into a private key.
Is there a scenario where Bitcoin has to migrate away from ECDSA curves?
100%. Oh,
100%?
yeah,
100%.
Yeah, I would say it's looking extremely, more and more to the point where it's extremely plausible that we have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer within our lifetime. It's more of a matter of when, not if. I think pretty much. I mean, if you look at, and like let's zoom out of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a relatively small problem when we're thinking about cryptography deployed in the real world. If you're looking at what governments are saying about these quantum processors and the need to upgrade to post-quantum cryptography, they're putting in requirements that government agencies migrate over by 2030. And so, if governments think that it's a very real risk, or I guess, you could look at it as why would governments require migration to post-quantum cryptography if they don't think quantum computing is a real risk? And then to put these timelines as short as they are adds more reason to believe.
And would you say that, ironically, it's the nation state that is a prime attacker here of the protocol? And would you say that the quantum technology is so high barrier to entry, let's say, that there isn't a private enterprise, building a quantum computer in a garage somewhere in Mongolia, that that
Yeah.
that is actually better than Google's kind of thing. Do we know information on that?
So the largest quantum computing companies in the world that, I mean, so at its heart, it's a scientific pursuit, right? I mean, if you're going to build a fault tolerant, which mean a very large scale quantum computer, you need a lot of science behind it. And once you have the sort of requisite scientific breakthroughs, then it turns into an engineering problem of actually building the infrastructure. The scientific pursuit and this goes into the philosophy about science, right? I mean, like, whether you think you can do better science in a closed chamber, in a garage, or if you think you can do better science out in sort of an open, sort of globalized market of peer-reviewed papers. That's that I mean, I would boil this question down to that. Whether you think better science is done in a garage or out in the open. I tend to think, and there's, I mean, there's combinations of both, right? So China's approach has been, let's basically observe all of the scientific advancements being made, out in the sort of like Western scientific hemisphere, and take the state of the art and bring it in-house and try to make advancements on those as far as they can. But a lot of Chinese papers and claims are largely unsubstantiated. They haven't been peer reviewed. They sort of obfuscate or omit details in their papers that would allow other people to validate or verify the claims that they're making, even the assumptions that they're making going into their models. And so, you can have both worlds. I think, my perspective is that the largest and probably the most advanced quantum computing companies in the world are based in Western countries because that's what we can validate. But I think there's also a large likelihood that nation state actors, and once you get into the territory of building a quantum computer and you reach like a certain level um, of sort of recognition, as in people actually believe that the tech you're building is real, you'll have the government knocking on your door, and you'll need to report to them. I mean, that's every quantum computing company in America has some relationship with the NSA and the Department of with the U.S. government. And so there are sort of probably elements similar to China where they need to get clearance on U.S. companies need to get clearance on what they tell the public and what they make available to the public, and making sure that the government is in lockstep with all of the scientific breakthroughs that they're making, scientific and/or engineering breakthroughs that they're making. But I think and so I think to the public's view, I think it's very plausible that sort of current quantum capacities are very different from what is being broadcasted. But I think governments will have they'll have a better view of the playing field, and and being able to assess how soon a cryptographically relevant quantum computer is going to come online.
Okay.
That's sort of my take.
From how I received that, it's basically there's so much that goes into building a quantum computer that the threat of, let's say, Google or a Chinese nation or whoever, Russia, whoever, having their own quantum computer is more likely than, someone we don't know, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's
Which is a good
fair.
thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
That's a
Yeah,
positive
I mean,
thing.
good is yeah, it is what it is. I mean, I'm not sure whether that's good or bad.
Or whether it will
I'm really
remain.
what's that?
Or whether it will remain. Because I mean, now with AI, maybe AI can go build a quantum thing,
I mean, uh, I don't know if I mean, who was it? George Hotz who shared that? George Hotz. I mean, he's the guy who jailbroke the iPhone. Back when he was a teenager, and
Interesting.
I mean, he's doing a lot of fantastic things, building AI chips these days. Um, but I think several people have raised the idea that the class of BQP is equal to P, which is basically we talked about these rings, these concentric rings, and basically what he's saying is that he doesn't see any real advantage you get when computing over information using physics, because he thinks that basically a problem is a problem, uh, and whether you use a quantum computer or a classical computer to solve it, the underlying mathematics should remain the same. And so he actually thinks that we don't need a quantum computer to break cryptography. So you don't need to leverage properties like quantum mechanics to break cryptography. He thinks you can use AI plausibly to break cryptography because the underlying structure doesn't change. The way that you're going about searching the structure changes, but he thinks that there's it's the fundamentally same structure regardless of which modality you use. And so yeah, I think to your point of it could be AI that breaks cryptography. I don't think we should rule it out, and I think there's healthy discussion to be had there on whether using AI we're able to achieve a lot of the things that we intended to achieve with quantum.
Okay, not to go too much out of the realm of speculation, let's say, because some of my questions were a bit of speculating. Like,
For sure.
BTQ, are they working with Bitcoin Core here
So fundamentally,
or
no.
any other client?
So the entire premise of Bitcoin Quantum is that Bitcoin Core will not get its stuff together in time to solve the quantum risk. I mean, that's what our entire thesis is built on, right? Like the idea of us forking the code base and not forking the state, not forking the chain, but forking the code base and going off and building our own quantum safe Bitcoin network implies that we aren't working with Bitcoin Core on this. And to work with Bitcoin Core is it seems like a bit of a weird thing to say because it's just a bunch of it's a decentralized network of developers. And that being said, we are working with the code base, and so we basically stripped out. We take the protocol as is, a relatively simplified version of the protocol that was back in 2011, forked it, stripped out all of the all of vulnerable cryptography and replaced it with post quantum. So in a way, we we share the same mother. We err from the same code base, but we're fundamentally working on, as you said, Andrew, it's a consensus problem, which will take a very long time to solve. We know technologically how to solve it. So our proposition is, well, let's take the technological solutions, bypass the social consensus, and recreate a new network that allows social consensus to inevitably form around itself, to basically amass enough gravity to the point where if it actually is useful, then gravity uh, will attract.
And you said, so just to clarify what I think I heard, that you're confident that BIP 360 and the BTQ testnet is the solution right now?
No, I don't.
No,
I don't think it's necessarily the solution. It's an environment to test solutions
it's an
and to
environment
deploy
test.
and iterate on solutions. We're not saying we have the solutions. Again, I mean, we're all open source. It'll be, anyone and ever can come contribute. But we're bypassing the social consensus that's required in order to test solutions at a large scale.
Ah, okay. So you're basically saying instead of waiting for everyone to come together and do something, we're going to be a bit proactive,
Yes, exactly.
contribute a little
Exactly.
bit to the scene and
Yep.
offer this forked, let's say, sandbox for miners, nodes, different kinds of wallets to go and build with the hope that collectively we will the testnet will be quantum secure because it's taken on the pay to make a root P2MR model. It removes key part spending and shift script based control, essentially BIP 360. Am I in the
Yeah.
right frame of mind? Yeah,
Yeah,
do I understand it?
I think that's the right way to think about it. It's like Chris said, it's one of the solutions. We're not going to say it's the end all be all. Bitcoin needs to 100% follow us, or else they're screwed. So it's a test bed to test different solutions like the one we have implemented right now, which we believe has theoretic secure, like quantum secureness, because we have implemented the NIST standardized digital signature scheme with the lithium, and because we're now also securing the spending paths, right, with P2MR slash BIP 360. And then later on, we might implement like a quantum proof of work to secure the proof of work consensus problem. So just trying to find the solutions and test different solutions that and fill the gaps where a quantum computer might come in and be able to break what is currently working for Bitcoin. So we're starting with the digital signatures, starting with the transactions, the transfers, And then eventually we want to plug in all these different holes to make the whole network secure and sustainable and lead the way for Bitcoin.
Okay. Okay, so let's say now a year, 2 years have passed. How would you be measuring those 2 years in the form of success? What are you looking for the next year or 2 or 3 in this part with this particular test net?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it
What
would be
would
rate of.
what would be an ideal 2 years to hit, and this happened on 2 years, like.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for me, the way to think about it is the rate of change over the course of the next 2 years. We can see how quickly Bitcoin has been able to move, where it took them 7 years to implement a large scale change to the network. If we're able to, as a community, be able to iterate on quantum proofing Bitcoin faster than Bitcoin Core is, I would see that as a success. So I would say like, speed and rate of iterations over the course of the next 2 years. And, what that looks like at the end of the 2 years is a much more robust understanding of the possibilities of the solutions and the effects, right? So the sort of not only how to get there, but, what happens at each, what are the sort of consequences and the side effects of the different proposals and solutions on the table, so that we're able to make as good of a decision as a community at the whatever 2 years or 3 years, or I mean really it's I mean the beauty of Bitcoin Quantum is that you can deploy a solution anytime, and have that have that run as the leading candidate. And then, as soon as you sort of identify a possible better solution, then to upgrade it appropriately.
Can I go back to the addresses again? So
Yep.
we've identified the addresses which are a bit of a risk. Not a bit, they are a risk.
Mhm.
Which address aren't a risk? Where if you store them in with that sort of wallet, you're safer, let's say.
On Bitcoin today or on
On
Bitcoin
Bitcoin
Quantum?
today, on Bitcoin today,
Nowhere.
nowhere.
Well,
Um,
theoretically, if you do the pay to public key hash and you don't reuse it, then that's theoretically secure, right?
So
yeah, but
when
then but just elaborate on that. I mean, yeah, your tokens would be secure, but what happens to the value of your token? I mean, what if the value of your tokens are zero, right? So like the issue that we're dealing with isn't just safeguarding token that Bitcoin the issue that Bitcoin deals with isn't just safeguarding tokens. It's safeguarding the value of those tokens, right? Do we all agree on that?
those tokens. I mean, today
Right.
it's worth 70,000, and 2 weeks ago it was worth 100. 2 months ago, whenever it was worth 100,000. So that's the value you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The dollar value of those tokens. And if tomorrow you realize that 1/3 of the network could have their tokens be taken away and sold arbitrarily, what happens to the value of what happens to the price tomorrow? I mean,
I
I
had
think it.
questions on this. I was building up to
Yeah.
this, so I'm glad
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up. Do you think actually that is a major risk? I mean, yes. Let's say Satoshi's coins, the 1 million become, let's say, a target, but that's what 1 on 21 on the total supply. I think Hunter Beast said it was like a little bit of inflation. Uh,
Mm,
not that bad of an inflation, like not hyperinflation or anything like that. So that makes me a little bit content, at least.
mhm.
Do you think
Yeah.
the
Well,
same, or
so there's a good resource by the Project 11 team. It's the
The
they have
yellow
a
book.
basically. Well, that's another resource, but they have one where they index all of the sort of like vulnerable Bitcoin, that a quantum computer could attack, and it's somewhere around 6 point some odd million BTC, which is 1/3 of the network. So, I mean, that's what I think concretely we can use as the number of Bitcoin that's at risk from a quantum computer. And there could be, could be a little bit more depending on how people are transacting. It doesn't take into account all of that. But, let's just say, 1/3 of the network. So, I mean, I think with that as a starting point, it feels like that's enough where a price, the price would be adversely affected if 1/3 of the entire network could be,
No, it would shock the
stolen at
network.
any point.
It
Yeah.
would shock the network 100%, the whole industry actually, not just the network.
Yeah.
So when it comes to quantum protection, will we ever mathematically know with 100% certainty that this particular way of securing the coins will work all the time? Or are we all going to always have this nagging, listen, it's getting better quantum, listen, it's getting better quantum, listen, you need to update this, because then it's like, you have to just keep up with the pace kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, so that's a question of, in cryptography, they call it informational security versus, cryptographic security. And so like everything that we're doing today has, we make some assumption on the types of computation that are made available. And that's what you're sort of pointing to, Andrew. It's, like, it's this chase of cat and mouse, right? We have some sort of scientific breakthrough, we upgrade an algorithm appropriately, and then, a scientific breakthrough makes that new updated algorithm no longer secure, so then we need to update it again. And so that's, that's pretty much baked into our current way of doing cryptography and doing security, where we're always going to be making computational assumptions on the algorithms that we deploy in these cryptographic schemes. So I do think that's going to be a relatively permanent feature of our technology. Now, there are ways that we can plausibly move to information theoretic security, which means security that is based in the basically laws of physics. And assuming that there's no, I mean, there we also deal with cat and mouse, where if there's basically a new branch of physics or a larger subset of physics that we previously didn't know, then we would need to amend our information theoretic schemes on those new physics. But assuming, and again, it is an assumption, assuming quantum mechanics is the sort of most advanced and most comprehensive set of physics that we experience in reality, then we could plausibly use quantum technologies to perform encryption, and move our computational assumptions up to the level of information theoretic assumptions. But that's a bit of that's something that we're interested in, and actually, I think we're very much working on this, but it's a paradigm shift in the way that we think about security.
Okay, so it's like maybe is the answer. It's gonna be
Yeah,
maybe a cat
maybe.
and mouse,
I think like, for all um for the purpose of discussion, to keep it simple, I think it's very likely we'll be playing cat and mouse with computational assumptions for the next couple of decades, and plausibly within our lifetime we might be able to settle on some information theoretic security scheme, cryptographic scheme.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm having a few thoughts, and I'm more or less asked my questions.
Okay, good.
If let's say Google comes up with a quantum computer, I mean, why would Google want to attack the Bitcoin network? And on top of that, do you think that it's actually fair quantum theft because they put in the proof of work to basically do it? And
Oh,
the last
that's
part
yeah.
is can quantum computers like actually change the code? You know, like can actually change the layer one code on some level.
Yeah. Okay, so the first question, like, if Google were to develop a quantum computer, why would they even want to attack Bitcoin? Um, I mean, that's really hard to answer. I don't represent Google, and even, we talked about, previously the interactions between any leading quantum computing company and the government. And so, it no longer just becomes Google, it becomes whichever government Google is reporting to, and their interests, which is even more abstract to me. I certainly don't know the agenda of the US government today, or even, I mean, certainly tomorrow. So it becomes really hard for me to answer. But what does become clear to me that is that, again, coming back to the perception of value, the mere idea of, or not even the idea, the ability, the demonstrated ability for anyone in the world to be able to break Bitcoin would have an adverse consequence on the price of the asset. And you no longer have a digital store of value that is grounded in that technology. It
It's true.
no longer equates, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
just the mere ability of someone to be able to do that, I think, destroys the value in it. So but yeah, do you want to go?
Andreas Antonopoulos had described Bitcoin as a vault, basically, at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, that's what it's sort of marketed and believed to be. It's like a, yeah, digital vault, like a, yeah, like a
Yeah.
digital Fort Knox.
Right. You just hope in our fast moving world, when technology is advancing so fast that it's also quantum secure, all right, for the next decade. But like coming back to the risks and advancements, I don't think you will know. I'm in the camp of like the public, us. We won't know when major labs, companies and governments have access to the latest like quantum advancements. It's gotten to the point where they won't disclose their findings, right? They're going to use it to their advantage first. I think it's similar to like a Cold War reference, right, where people are fighting to get to space, and it's to prove that they are the leading world power. And I think quantum as an industry holds enough of power, of enough advancement and influence over the world that can propel a country, a nation state over others. And that's why it's such a national priority. Um, so yeah, because of this, and even just looking at macroeconomics and politics, right? Our world is no longer like the peaceful time that we lived in 10, 20 years ago. It's getting more fragmented. A new world order, as our Canadian Prime Minister likes to say, is coming, right? And that requires chaos, entropy, and people are going to use these technologies as potentially weapons against each other. Is Google going to attack Bitcoin? Not sure. Is another nation state going to attack Bitcoin to maybe destabilize the US economy? Maybe. I don't think you should rule that out. Especially coming from Taiwan, we're very sensitive to politics, and different nation states have their own interests. I think these are all possibilities and that can influence like political outcomes.
Yeah, it feels a bit like quantum computing is the discovery of the digital nuclear bomb, almost.
Yeah,
Please don't
right.
use it, but we have it, kind of thing. Just to
Yeah.
close, I had a question on Lightning. How is the testnet catering for Lightning?
Yeah, so we haven't been focused on the like, enabling Lightning Network type features yet. We're still focused on the, core security of the underlying network. This, pay to Merkle route, BP360, it unlocks Lightning like capabilities, so that's really good. But we see that as something that will be attending at some point in the near future once we have our a really stable L1 deployed.
Yeah. Okay. I've more or less asked my questions, and this quantum topic is so it's quite vast. Like you can
Hmm.
go in many different
You can
directions.
go exactly.
And
Yeah,
I was
it's.
trying to equate it down to something that happened in the past, actually. And
Hmm.
I tried to think, what was a technology that did this to humanity? And I thought of the gun as 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 that. So one day, it's the 12th century and he's shooting arrows, and all of a sudden
Hmm.
this guy comes with this new technology and starts firing at you, kind of thing.
Hmm.
I
Right.
don't think we're there because we know the gun exists. So it's probably a beneficial thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's unique, and when you think about it in its sort of in its fullness, it's very unique. I think there's a bunch of analogies that
Like,
we can attribute it can attribute to it depending on what we're looking at. Like, one nice analogy is as far as security goes, it's like Y2K, when like, everyone knew at the year 2000, all of our clocks and all of our information systems were going to be messed up because they didn't know how to process. And so there was this sort of like large consolidated effort to, like, we knew it was going to come, so we needed to manage that. But unlike Y2K, Y2Q, which also messes up all of our technology systems, we don't know when that's coming. And so it's a bit of an interesting, it's like, yeah, a bit of an interesting problem because we need to coordinate a worldwide upgrade without knowing exactly when that deadline is.
yeah, or an upgrade for yourself, and you signal to everyone, listen, if you want to upgrade as well, you can. I
Yep.
think
Yeah, exactly. And
that's
that's,
how it's gonna
yeah,
work, I think. You
yeah,
can't
yeah.
force people to protect their own coins, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but then I mean, yeah, certainly can't force people to. Um, where I was going with this was like I think to your point about having someone initiate it. I mean, I think we are already seeing that, and again, it's mostly national governments. Like, most people don't think twice about cryptography. Most people think they ask me what I do. I say cryptography. They ask me, "Oh, you take pictures?" They think I'm saying photography, but most people don't know cryptography.
Literally
So
the opposite.
there's, yeah, 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 yeah. But I mean, I think it'll be like large governments and companies who lead the way here. But then
Okay.
the challenge is like doing that in a way where users don't feel the adverse effects of it, and that's really what we're trying to figure out with Bitcoin Quantum.
So just before I end, because this is what I'm not totally sure on yet. Can quantum, can a bad actor on quantum who has the technology mess with the mining and mess with, the 10 minutes,
Mhm.
and mess with the difficulty adjustment, and just
Okay, right.
mess with
Yeah.
the 21 million? Can it do that?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, you asked, and we didn't address this, but you asked whether like a bad actor can actually like change the code on the blockchain. Um, the way that Bitcoin operates, it's a decentralized network of node operators, right? And so what you'd be doing, what would be required is, forcing everyone on that network, on the Bitcoin network, to use a specific code base that is malicious, let's call it, because we're calling them a bad actor. So I think that's relatively unlikely. I think, most people would be able to uh, sort of sniff out whether an attack like that was being rolled out on a large scale. So yeah, simply put, having a quantum computer doesn't allow you to necessarily change the rules of the network overnight.
Okay.
But what it could do is, I mean, again, it's mostly an attack on cryptography and the security of your tokens. And to your question about
I think I lost you, Chris.
We lost you.
Yeah.
Hey,
Okay.
Okay, now
so
you're back.
okay,
Just 5
thanks.
seconds only.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on this. You'll see a paper coming out later this year, actually in a couple of months, and analyzing this from from a team of quantum physicists. It seems like SHA-256 is very secure.
Good.
To be able to mine Bitcoin in a 10-minute block, you'll need a quantum computer the size of pretty much the universe, by the methodologies used today. So it seems pretty secure.